What Really Happened with your host, Mike Rivero. The history the government hopes you never learn. Here is your host, Michael Rivero.
And aloha, America. Welcome to our show today. It is Wednesday, January 4th, 2017 here, middle of the weekday, hump day, starting that long, slow glide down to Powha on a Friday, and another crazy weekend of what the heck are they going to try and do now. Boy, I got to tell you, we got a lot of stuff to talk about today. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. Mike is in the control room, ready to answer the phone when you call on in. And we're going to start by getting this story. It came and went this morning, but we're going to mention it anyway. Apparently, there was another commuter train derailment in New York, not as bad as the one they had in Hoboken. Apparently, the engineer was just going too fast, failed to brake. It hit the bump stop at the end of the track, popped up, and more than 100 injured. Nobody dead. Worst injury, a broken leg. But I would think by now they might be considering some kind of an automated system that says, hey, we're coming into the station, let's slow down. What am I saying? They need the money for war. So, of course, these things aren't going to get dealt with over here. Now, WikiLeaks has started to uncork new revelations, and that's ramping up the tension in the bowels of power in Washington, D.C. A lot of new stuff is coming on up. One of the most important, and this is a reminder about who is the real media and who's the fake media. It seems that back in 2009, all the way back then, during Obama's first year in office, records of the Clinton administration were stolen from the National Archives. And apparently it was this gigantic hard drive that had all the official records, the work product of the Clinton White House, and it simply vanished. Now, that work product is the product of the people. It's paid for by tax dollars. It is supposed to be kept for records to find out what was going on during the Clinton administration. Of course, we know the Clintons don't want anybody to know that, either today or in history books 50 years down the road. When this happened, back in 2009, the corporate media did not report it. You don't need to know the Clintons are covering up their tracks, as they have been doing their entire political career. We have disasters, fire, and flood, followed by a fashion show. Now, Julian Assange is out there. He gave an interview to Sean Hannity. He's starting to become a more public figure now that he's no longer confined to that embassy. And basically says that Barack Obama is trying to delegitimize Donald Trump by claiming he's a Russian stooge because of the Russian hacking. And we're hearing this all across the liberal whiners. Oh, Trump isn't a legitimate president. He's in league with Russia. He's doing this. He's doing... The crybabies will not quit. They're still looking for some way they can get Trump out, or at least paralyze him so he can't do anything. And this is not how you're supposed to run a government of the people, by the people, and for the people. And Washington, D.C. is understandably in a panic. Lindsey Graham was on CNN saying nobody should listen to Julian Assange on anything. You know, even Donald Trump, you should listen and trust our U.S. intelligence agencies. Like, for example, the CIA and the NSA, who both say there's no evidence of Russian hacking. But, I mean, that's the point they're at. Lindsey Graham, you could practically see the sweat beating up on his forehead. Don't listen to Lindsey Graham. Don't look at the truth. You know, we survive on our lies and everything. And apparently not having any hard facts or logic or law on their side, the corporate media is now sinking to ad hominem attacks. And apparently there was a big stink because former Deputy Director of the CIA, Phil Mudd, was on CNN. And somewhere in the course of that interview, the claim was made that Julian Assange is a pedophile. Oh, see, you shouldn't read his posts. That might be contagious. You might read a WikiLeaks and all of a sudden get an uncontrollable urge to molest a Cub Scout or something. Or an altar boy, as the case may be. WikiLeaks has responded saying that CNN has 48 hours to issue a 1-hour retraction and expose of this false claim, or they will sue for defamation. And they've got a good, solid case because that video is all over the internet right now. Paul Ryan is out there saying Julian Assange is a sycophant for Russia. That's their whole thing right now. Anybody who does not go along with the official version of whatever the government wants you to believe, they're a Russian agent. Remember a couple of weeks ago when the Washington Post was slandering and defaming independent media websites, including mine, that we were arms for the Russian Ministry of Propaganda. I don't know that this arm would be particularly of any value to them. It's getting a little flabby with age. But, I mean, that's where they are right now. They're down to the name-calling. You know, you smell funny, and your mother dresses you weird, and you pass wind in the elevators. I mean, that's where the corporate media is right now. It's just hurling insults and abuse and not much else. We posted an interesting flashback, and before we get into that, we're going to do a quick shout-out to our on-air affiliates who are just now rejoining our network, and we're talking about the battle between the corporate media and the independent media with emphasis on WikiLeaks' latest revelations and the backlash of absolute panic it has triggered. So we went back to this story from 2016 about this so-called dating website that was basically posting all these attacks on Julian Assange. And everybody was saying, it's a dating site, why do you care? But they were really uncorking. And as it turns out, it was a propaganda cutout, because on investigation, the company's operating address turned out to be a warehouse loading dock in Houston. Its mailing address went to a Houston drop box. The phone numbers don't work. And apparently, WikiLeaks was investigating this company for these possible lawsuit for slander, and Texas officials said the business wasn't even registered to operate. And that, basically, that's something that happens a lot. When they want to launder data, when they want to launder the propaganda, they'll create a cutout. A good example of that would be the Syrian Observatory for Human Rights, which is cited as the inevitable gospel truth about what's going on in Syria, except that it's run out of a one-bedroom house in Coventry, England, by a guy whose day job is selling T-shirts. He has not been to Syria in 12 years. But he simply parrots whatever the official line on Syria is, and now that it's spoken by the Syrian Observatory for Human Rights, the corporate media picks it up and runs with it. We're not lying to you. This is what the Syrian Observatory for Human Rights is telling us, and we trust them. They're an unimpeachable source here. Now, I'm going to have to do a little bit of a hat tip to Sarah Palin. I know I was very rough on her, and let's face it, deservedly so, when she was McCain's vice presidential running mate. But she has gone public saying that she now apologizes to Julian Assange for some of the negative things that she said about him in the past. And I think more and more people are finally beginning to realize that and to recognize that allegations of Assange's personal behavior are probably about as realistic as Hillary Clinton's poll numbers going into the general election. Now, Donald Trump continues to express doubts about Russia's efforts to sway the U.S. vote. He says he's got inside information that he's about to reveal. Now, today was supposed to be the day when officials from the FBI and the Department of Homeland Security, who put out that report saying that Russia hacked the election while not actually having anything inside that proved it, were supposed to meet with Donald Trump to brief him on the classified portions of that data. And they called it off. They didn't show up because they don't have any proof. They don't have any proof. That entire report relies on the fact that most people will look at a headline, think they know what's going on, and not bother to read the brief. Newspapers do that all the time. And we have pointed out many, many times where there'll be a banner headline implying something, and when you actually get further into the story, it says, but actually it may have been something else entirely. And you need to look for that. You can't be a lazy reader during this war between the corporate media and the independent media. So, let's take some phone calls. Robin in Houston, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Aloha, Michael. Well, I just discovered you about a month ago, and God bless you for everything you're doing.
Thank you.
But two things I noticed. I've gone back in history on YouTube so I could catch up on a lot of your other broadcasts. And since 3 months have gone by, I've gone back as far as September, And a lot of things that you were worried that might happen because how aggravated and agitated the DNC was against Trump, worried what might happen to Trump or whatever. You put it out there on the airwaves. You put it out there on YouTube. It got Twittered, everything. And people can't, I think you might have been like a pre-whistleblower, keeping devastation from happening because you already put it out there.
That was exactly, you're exactly right. That's the reason I put these things out there, because when you're talking about people who are planning an assassination or a false flag attack, our greatest weapon against them is their doubt. And as long as we can make them doubt that the official cover story of the crazed lone nut assassin or Russia or whatever is not going to be believed, then they won't greenlight these things. And so that's why we talk about these things and put them out there as possibilities, because then these planners are saying, "Whoa, boy, you know, the American people are expecting us to do an assassination. They're expecting a false flag or something. If we do it now, we're just going to be validating everything the independent media is saying about us."
And even with everything that's gone on in Europe, that you pretty much called it in advance, I mean, speculated in advance of what could possibly happen, it at least from my mind, I know it's not, I kind of feel, of course, they're all false flags just to bring up the level of intensity. And since you've been forewarning about World War III before the inauguration, I don't think now we have a thing to worry about because everybody's been hearing it for months now.
Well, I'm not going to jump to that conclusion. In fact, later on in the show, there are warning signs that the neocons may just go ahead and try this and start the war anyway, and they've reached the point of saying, the American people don't believe us anymore anyway. We'll declare war. We'll invoke the war powers. Anybody who speaks out against the government we'll throw in prison for sedition. But I can feel the panic coming out from inside that beltway right now. All these people, they've grown up just used to a life of wealth, comfort, privilege, and power. They feel it slipping away from them, and they're reacting out of a place of fear, not careful consideration and rational thought.
It's insanity, but that's one thing. I don't want you to ever be wrong about anything, but I hope you're wrong about that. And I know you have other callers. The other thing I wanted to mention, you were talking about the autopsy for the campaign waste at $1.6 billion.
Yes.
I think Veritas said exactly where it went. Between going to the DNC and the Democracy Partners and AUC and the Phobal Group and busing people in and training agitators and having ground groups in all these cities, that's where I'm sure half that money went.
Well, quite possibly, but see, the problem with that is much of that activity you've just described is illegal under campaign finance laws. And I'm sure probably some of the money was finding its way out of that Clinton Foundation as well to fund some of this. But in terms of the legally allowable campaign financing, they can't account for all that money, and that's why Hillary's backers are very upset. They had basically been donating these huge sums of money to her in the belief that whoever has the most money will win the election. That was the conventional wisdom up until this last election, and now they're angry. There was a huge amount of money that they put in, and they're not going to get their expected benefit from it, and they're very angry, and they're now questioning whether that money did entirely go to fund Hillary Clinton's campaign, or if maybe some of it just wound up in her pocket, and that's a very legitimate concern.
Well, yeah, well, the being legal or moral has done nothing to thwart them until now, so I don't, in going to her campaign, it basically did, because it was heard say that these things were her idea, so hopefully more will spill out and heads will roll. But I will let you go before you let me go. And good job, and love to Claire. I've been enjoying listening to her on Fridays as well.
Well, Robin, I will tell her that, and I would never cut you off. You're so charming and lovely, and you say nice things about me. But you are right about one thing, and that is the fact that we should see heads roll, not out of vengeance, but we have an opportunity now, and we must seize it, to establish a precedent for future generations of politicians who are already born, they're growing up, they're learning how to be political, and we have to establish you can't do this kind of stuff anymore. Because right now, if Hillary skates on all this stuff scot-free, there's going to be 20 new Bill and Hillary Clintons out there saying, well, we can do it too. And our nation barely survived one set of Clintons. It's not going to survive 20 or 30.
Oh, one last thought before I forget and you let me go.
Mm-hmm.
When I was watching the videos that O'Keefe put out, and and he did this little, he did something explaining it to these people. I don't know what it was, but not just the views on YouTube, but 75 million views on Twitter, along with the 20 plus million views on YouTube. That's 100 million people. If they don't, and that was just 3 weeks before the election, if people don't think that had something to do with Hillary not turning out the vote, they're crazy. It had to.
Oh, it was the independent media, the social media was a major factor. And up until the election, the attitude, the group belief within the power structure was it's an interesting phenomenon and maybe we can make money off of it, but it's not a game changer for us. The general election was a wake-up call. It was the ice bucket challenge in the face of the establishment, and that's why they're reacting with panic right now over WikiLeaks' latest revelations. They're having a panic reaction to the independent media, and everything that they're proposing to do to try and silence us goes right up against that First Amendment. Unfortunately, somebody's going to have to take this all the way to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court is going to have to say there is nothing in the Constitution that says the government can overtly, legally influence mass communication. They've been covertly doing it all along. But this idea that they can silence anybody who doesn't agree with them, that's what the First Amendment is for.
Right. Oh, and the other thing, and then I really will go, they're complaining Donald Trump, President-elect, is tweeting and all this stuff. Well, 8 years ago, I remember them praising Obama for being the first president to step into the social media so he could, and that's what really got him elected, reaching the younger people, reaching the younger generation or the technology age. They were praising him for it, and they're slamming Donald for it, or Mr. Trump, I should say.
Well, the reason for that, and after all the work we've done for him, I think we're on a first-name basis. The reason they're angry with Donald is that Obama used social media in conjunction with the corporate media. And what Trump is doing, he's going to bypass corporate media. He's cutting them out of the information flow. And they don't like that at all. But then they did it to themselves by supporting Hillary, by covering up for all of her crimes, by attacking Donald Trump, by making stories up about him. It's unrealistic for them to expect any gratitude or cooperation from the Trump White House, especially when they continue distorting his words. So Trump wants to be able to communicate honestly with the American people, and he realizes he can't do that going through the corporate media. So he's going to be using Facebook and Twitter and YouTube and probably the new media company his son-in-law is setting up. And, of course, Donald, you're always welcome to send anything out through whatreallyhappened.com.
Well, I'm jazzed about it. My husband's jazzed about it. And us here in Houston, Texas, a lot of our friends, when they went to vote, based on listening to you, I said, make sure you look at your results, make sure you read what you got. And sure enough, I got all these messages. Robin, we went to vote, and we did the straight Republican ticket. And when they looked at their printout, it was blank for president. It didn't say Hillary, but it was blank for the president and vice president.
Yes.
So they made a big stink and got it fixed. But that was, you know, you saved the day there, too. So,
oh, well,
goodbye.
I blush. I blush.
Aloha, and love to you all.
Aloha, thank you very much. We're going to let you go here. We're coming up on a commercial break. Well, I'm glad to hear that. I mean, very often I work in the dark here. I have a sense of what my website's readership is from the server numbers. I have no way of knowing how much it gets retweeted or echoed or how much impact I'm having, and it's always, you know, I don't want to turn into an egomaniac, you know, but it's nice to know that I actually have not totally wasted the last 22 years of my life, and Claire's. All right, we're going to take a break for commercials, and we'll be back after these few words from our sponsors. And aloha, America, welcome back to the show, and I want to remind everybody with all this brouhaha about we're pretty gosh darn sure maybe kinda that Russia hacked our elections, therefore we should go to war with them, is a little bit hypocritical. Because the CIA has acknowledged tampering with elections over 81 times in the last century. So it is a little hypocritical to make a stink about it now. I guess the attitude at the CIA is, our election rigging is good, and their election rigging is bad. And all of a sudden, being hacked by Russia, that's the new fashion trend. Everybody wants to be on board here. Now there's a power company up in Ontario saying that, oh, we found that IP address, we're being hacked too. I can just see a whole crowd of people out there saying, Russia hacked me, I'm trendy, I'm hip, I got hacked by Russia. We need a t-shirt, potential victim of Russian hacking. Sell it in our online store. And hyping up on that, former CIA Director James Woolsey is saying, well, it was more than just Russia. They're all in cahoots against us. They're all trying to hack and destroy our nation here. Raising on a busted flush on that one. All right, let's take a phone call. Dustin in New Jersey. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yeah, hi, Mike. Your previous caller, which was your first caller, she was right on everything except we are in an economic World War III right now. That's one thing. It's not over yet. There's a reason why they're sending all those tanks and troops to the border. And so it's not over yet. It's not going to be over for a while. And they better pray that those tanks don't cross the Russian border because they'll use nukes on them because they're not going to let something happen like Nazi Germany rolling in like last time.
Yeah.
Remember that.
Yeah,
and
Russians
Napoleon before that.
Yeah, exactly. Russia will not allow anybody to make any headway once they're across that Russian border. But it does seem like the neocons or warhawks or the military-industrial complex are just dead set to find a way to get the American people to go along with this idea that we have to have war with Russia. And what I was saying before about instilling doubt in the perpetrators, I think it's actually working because we had two absolutely powerful targets for false flags on Christmas and New Year's. Neither one of them happened. And so they're out there still thrashing around trying to find a propaganda device where the vast majority of the American people will say, get those Russians, get those gosh darn Russians. And that's a really tough sell when you have an American people whose trust and confidence in the government and corporate media is in the single digits. They're really spinning their tires in all that snow and ice, to mix my metaphors. So who knows what they're going to do, but they're definitely putting the assets in position for a blitzkrieg into Russia from Europe, mostly Lithuania. We know that the U.S. has sent all these tanks over there. They've got all these people over there. They're just in position. The instant somebody says, yeah, I think we can get away with selling war with Russia to the American people, let's go now.
Well, that's why Putin put the Iskander-M in Kaliningrad. Those are short-range ballistic, tactical, capable, nuclear missiles. So that'll give them pause. That's why they're there, and I can probably say they probably have nuclear weapons in a bunker somewhere there to use. They're obviously not going to have them on there immediately. They'll have conventional warheads. But, Mike, people need to realize this is a declining Western oligarch, neoliberal, globalist empire, and Russia and China is basically their enemy because that is the new empire rising. This is what it's all about.
Exactly. It's a war between the Federal Reserve note, the ruble, and the yuan. And for that, they're willing to send millions of our kids to be killed and crippled.
They're willing to arm terrorists to kill women and children. Those moderate rebels, people don't realize this, but they left booby traps. The moderate rebels, John McCain says a bunch of young folks, they give them man-pads. They give them, Stinger missiles. They don't care how many people they kill, Mike. That people don't realize.
No, they don't.
People live in in the Western world, people don't realize that the government, not the whole government, but there's elements that are bad. It's hard for some people to acknowledge that. I don't understand.
Well, we're brainwashed from childhood to think we've got the greatest government on earth and everybody else is evil. We can look at it logically and rationally and say that's got to be nonsense. But again, those beliefs are instilled in us when we're very, very young, and our personalities grow up around those beliefs, and it's very hard to let go of them. Anyway, Dustin, I need to let you go because we got to do more commercials, and we'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. We're going to do a couple of stories and then get back to the phones. The lines are loading up here. Story that came out of Investment Watch blog. CNN did an interview of the hacker who got into the CIA director's private email. I want to emphasize that it was the director's personal email account. Nothing classified, didn't breach security or anything like that. But basically said he hacked his email while he was stoned. The weak link in any security system, any encryption system, is the human element, and that has been a big part of the problem. Julian Assange was saying that a 14-year-old could have hacked the Democratic emails if it hadn't been a leak, and apparently John Podesta's password was password. I mean, come on, people. And apparently Podesta fell for phishing emails as well. All right, we're going to go to the phones. Mark in North Carolina, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Mike. Two things. One, I don't know whether these fools don't understand something. I'd say we have about as much chance of beating Russia in a ground war right on their border as I would have of beating an MMA fighter in a street fight.
Well, I'll tell you, I disagree with Dustin. I think that if those NATO forces cross that border, that Russia will uncork on them with a devastating nuclear attack and just slap them down. Because the last thing Putin wants is a war of attrition. Because that's very, very chancy with the various economies. The U.S. and Russia alone, the U.S. would lose a war of attrition. But if the U.S. has got all of Europe all hot and bothered to go on in and smash the evil Russian Empire, then again they're looking at a repeat of Napoleon's march to Moscow, Hitler's march to Moscow. They're not going to let that happen again. I think they'll bring the hammer down very hard and make a point and say, this stops now.
But with the feminized military that we have today and that the Europeans are totally incompetent, I really don't think. But even if, let's say, God forbid, though, it does get to the next level, and that's, of course, nuclear. You know, when you and me were kids, we had to hide under our desk in school, air raid shelters and all, drills and all that. We understood the consequences of a nuclear war. I don't know what's wrong with people today, why they don't understand this. One 50 megaton bomb would probably destroy an entire state.
Well, it would, but the trend in nuclear weapons has been away from the strategic nuclear weapons to the tactical, smaller ones that are aimed at military assets. The idea of erasing each other's cities kind of faded away some years ago. There's only ever been a 50 megaton detonation once, and that was the Russian Tsar bomb, and they had it dialed back to half because they were scared of the thing. But the big, multi-megaton bombs, those are rarities now, and the vast majority of nuclear weapons are in the kiloton range.
Yeah, but when you figure that Russia has over 7,000 of them, we have over 7,000 of them. You know the big ones still exist. And let's say it went down to nitty-gritty, and one side or the other was really starting to lose. Don't you think the big ones would start to fly then? I do.
Well, I definitely agree with you. On the day when the U.S. realizes they're losing the war with Russia and China, because China will come in on Russia's side here, they'll resort to the nuclear weapons. As far as the older big bombs, you need to remember these things have shelf lives having to do with the decay of the fissile material in the first stage, and how difficult it is to keep the tritium in the second stage. Tritium has a half-life of only 12 years. And during the Bush administration, they did embark on a program of revamping and rebuilding some of those older nuclear weapons. But again, those were in the tactical range rather than the strategic weapons.
But one other thing, too, I don't know if these millennials don't understand something. Okay, they're not going to be sitting around playing video games or playing with their cell phones all day. If this, God forbid, starts, and I'm talking just a conventional war, right?
Yes.
They're going to be drafted.
Yes.
You don't have a big enough army to fight. No way do we have a large enough army. And the same thing with Europe. They better get it through their heads too.
Oh, I can hardly wait to see all these liberal kids drafted into combat, running from the front line saying, I need a safe space. I need a safe space. I don't know how to use a gun. I've never touched one in my life. Guns are bad. We're going to fight a war with a bunch of...
I think there'd be riots in the streets that would make the Vietnam draft drive and even the Civil War draft drives look small.
Yeah.
You would really start to see, you would really start to see it really, but the thing is this, I don't think Obama knows what he's doing. I don't think, as evil as Obama is, I really don't think he probably wants to do this. Okay? I think he's being pushed by other elements.
No question.
Hopefully it won't happen, and Trump will put an end to this. I'm just worried that there might be some. I don't trust this. What's the name? This guy heads the CIA. What's his name? Is the guy who supposedly converted to Wahhabi Islam in Saudi Arabia?
Oh, I'm blanking on it. But here's the point. There's no question Obama is being pushed from outside. Obama's about to leave the White House. He wanted to be a war president. He wasn't a very good one. And so what happens from this point on, he doesn't really care so long as he's not personally inconvenienced by a mushroom cloud. I think the reason we're seeing this intense escalation are all those people who want to get the war started before Donald Trump can be sworn in, and push it past a point that would make it impossible to turn it around, which is why I'm thinking blitzkrieg across the border and just jam onto Moscow as far as possible so that Putin and Trump can't just say, oh, let's quit, without howls of protest from the Russian and the pro-war American people.
I don't think that I'm saying I don't think that blitzkrieg would work. I'm a student. I love history.
Yes.
And I love to watch sometimes the History Channel, and when they show the Operation Barbarossa, Russians aren't going to let that happen. There's not going to be an Operation Barbarossa. The minute things start flying.
Don't curse on this here radio.
Yeah, I know. The minute anything starts, the Russians are the ones who are going to blitzkrieg. Okay? They're not going to let that, I'm sure Putin is ready for this. Putin is a military genius. He's a genius, period. I've done a lot of studying on the man, and the guy is a brilliant, he's a chess player, he's a judo artist, not only judo in the physical sense, but judo in a mental sense, too.
Yes.
He understands and he's, like I said, he's a chess master. He understands what's going on. He knows military history. The Russians themselves, they still, even though it was a communist army at the time, they still worship the veterans of that, what they call the Great Patriotic War.
Oh, they did. They did. Here in the United States, we worshipped our World War II veterans. And then after Vietnam, basically our government acted like it was the returned wounded veterans who'd lost the war. You have betrayed me. I mean, Hitler said the same thing toward the end of World War II. You have betrayed me. You have failed to carry out my orders. Losing the war is all your fault. And we'll probably see a little bit of that here. But, there is a concern. There are clear indications somebody's trying to get a shooting war going with Russia before Trump can take office. And all we, the American people, can do is be aware of that possibility, be aware that the aggression towards this war is coming from the side of the United States government and NATO, that Russia hasn't done anything to anybody to justify being invaded. But I think you're absolutely right. When you look at, as you put it, the feminization of our young people, or the liberalization, if you will. I mean, if we had that story a while back where the Army was forcing their male ROTC cadets to wear high heels for some feminist agenda. Okay? And you're going to take these people and you're going to put them into a combat situation? I don't think so. When you couple that with the very poor quality and high cost of America's current weaponry, you've got a disaster in the making, because regardless of who's fighting who, history has shown when it comes to war, the side that runs out of money first is the side that loses. And if you've got these kludgy, very expensive weapons that cost a fortune to replace, you're going to run out of money very, very quickly.
There's one other thing, too, Mike.
Yeah.
I think I've been listening to InfoWars the last couple of days, and there seems to be the military itself is half rebelling. they might repeat, and that's one of the reasons I think Trump might have all these generals in his cabinet. They might be telling Obama, you better not. They may even be telling him they'll arrest him before they let him start a war like that. I'm not saying it's definite, but I get the feeling that might be the case also. Especially now we're finding out how these terrorists were being armed, being admitted now. John Kerry was out there telling the terrorists who were going to arm them. And, you know, I've always said Hillary is the mother, Obama's the father of ISIS. And now it's all coming true. I mean,
well, now, let's be fair. Let's be fair, because this covert support of these jihadi groups goes all the way back to the George W. Bush administration. And it's true.
No,
yeah, okay.
Absolutely. But Bush is not in power right now. Bush should be, I think the whole bunch of them should be arrested, tried, and if they're found guilty, they should be hung on a public street by lampposts. That's my opinion.
I agree. I agree with that one. What we might see the military do rather than arrest Obama, which would be very dicey and could be construed as treason, is they might simply say the Constitution says only Congress can declare a war, and they will not carry out any orders for a war without a congressional approval. That would put the burden for declaring war on Russia on the Congress, and I don't think most of those congressmen people are going to be willing to go along with that, knowing that they'll be voted out of office 2 years from now.
Yeah, but you got that madman McCain and his.
He's just one guy.
Boy Wonder, Graham.
Yeah.
That are pushing for this too.
Well, you know, there's a whole bunch of both Republicans and Democrats are out there lobbying for more Russia sanctions. I say we go to the Congress and say, who wants to go up against Russia? And they raise their hands, give them a rifle and a parachute, load them on a plane, and send them over there.
Exactly.
Okay, because I'll tell you this, I am really, and this is because I'm part of the Vietnam generation, and I saw a lot of my friends go to Vietnam, and not all of them came back. I am sick and tired of these rich people in very protected, safe places saying that we should send our kids out to be killed and crippled for wars that make their wallets fatter. I've kind of reached my threshold of tolerance on that one.
And you know something too? Most of these top-notch neocons, really from the think tanks and all that, they're mostly veterans of not the veterans of the Vietnam War, but people who grew up, who actually dodged the draft during the Vietnam War. John Bolton, by the way, is one of them. Okay, and he never went in. So I mean, most of these neocons who want to put American troops all over the place, when the time came, they never even put on an American uniform. So that's another thing.
That's also why one reason the war is being managed so badly. None of these people actually have combat experience, you know, they're watching their computer simulations and they're listening to wishful thinking. And if you look at our foreign policy for the last 10 years, it's been one disaster after the other, after the other, after the other. This was all supposed to be over and done with in 2008, according to General Wesley Clark. And here we are still stuck in it. Go ahead.
Well, these fools think because Iraq fell so quickly, and so, you know, they think that this would be the case. That are they kidding me? Russia is not Iraq. You know?
No, it most assuredly is not. And Iraq didn't fall all that quickly. Remember the criticism that George Bush got from that photo op on the carrier with mission accomplished on the banner behind him? And they said, the mission isn't over, and there are large parts of Iraq are still fighting against us. Oh, well, it's a photo op, and we're just going to do this. And we're still mired in Iraq. We still have boots on the ground in Iraq. You know, they didn't fall that easily.
I mean, the actual invasion and taking of Baghdad and stuff like that, that happened quickly. But that would not happen with Russia. No way, no how. That's what I mean. There'd be a slaughter. There'd be a slaughter in that border, even nuclear weapons and no nuclear weapons.
Yeah, if the U.S. attacks Moscow directly, the nukes are going to fly. And Russia has already built a new generation of their railroad train launching systems. And apparently, as I understand it, these are now indistinguishable from regular passenger or freight trains when seen by satellites. And they're just running these trains all over the rail system of Russia, so nobody knows where they are. And that, of course, is part of deterrence. It's sort of their on-land version of America's SSBN fleet.
Right. If these Eastern European countries are smart. They tell us to go take a hike. Get you NATO. We don't even want to be in NATO. Get out of there. We're going to be the first
The
ones
ordinary people of all of Europe do not want this to happen. For them, the world wars are a recent memory. The countries in Europe still show the scars of the first two world wars. It's right there in front of them. They don't want to see it happen again because it's going to happen in their front yards. Their people are going to be killed. Their museums are going to be burned down. Their culture will be erased. And they don't want that to happen. It's the governments. It's the governments who are going along with this thing. They've been bought, bribed, or blackmailed into going along with this insane idea that all of the economic problems of planet Earth are going to be solved if we all gang up and kill the Russians.
And the fact of the matter is, but you got some fools that still believe that Russia's a communist nation, that it's still really the Soviet Union. You got some fools that actually believe that Putin is really is a communist. They don't know. I've been plenty of, looking up on Russia. I got Russian friends on Facebook and stuff.
Yep.
Christian country, mostly Christian. Some Muslims, mostly Christian, very religious, including Putin himself. Russian Orthodox.
I have a lot of contacts in Russia as well, mostly through the film industry, Goskino. They've got a booming film industry over there now. They've got, they're doing very well because they're a manufacturing country. They've been forced to become more self-sufficient because of that oil price war and the sanctions. They're actually on sturdier economic ground than the United States is right now.
The one big problem, I think, is they need to increase their population again.
Well,
but
what was that country in Europe? The country in Europe that wanted to build their population, and they actually had an ad campaign, screw for Sweden or screw for Switzerland, and it actually worked. They're having a surge of births now.
Yeah. Well, Putin is paying. They are paying people to have children, which is a smart thing. We should be doing the same thing in the United States.
No, we're actually a little overpopulated here, and again. You know something? I got to let you go. I'm going to respond after the commercial break. I got 2 more calls I need to get to. Been waiting very, very patiently. We'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. And responding to Mark here, one of the questions that was raised at the beginning of this huge inpouring of illegal immigrants and refugees was noticing how many of them are young men of military age. With the suggestion that maybe these people were being imported to be America's army in a war against Russia, given that the American people themselves are very much opposed to any more wars. We're war-weary. We've been at war with somebody for decade after decade after decade. We're sick and tired of it. But anybody who thinks that's a good idea, you're going to be in kind of a problem there, because these illegal immigrants, and yes, military recruiters have started going to them saying, if you will sign up for the Army, at the end of it you get a green card. But if they get into actual combat, they're not going to be effective fighters. They don't have an emotional connection with the United States. It's just a place where they're staying at the moment. They're not going to risk their life for that. And as far as the refugees are concerned, the reason they're in the United States is they're running away from the already ongoing wars started by the United States in their home countries. So that is just simply not going to work. I just got a wonderful email saying that, in point of fact, the U.S. will be able to defeat the Russian troops because when the Russian troops see our millennials running at them with their My Little Pony pastel-colored hairstyles and running around crying for safe spaces, the Russian troops will die laughing. Maybe, could be, possible. All right, back to the phones. Josh in Texas. Aloha. What's on your mind today?
Hey, Mike. That last caller, he was very, very informed about Eastern Europe and how they feel, and about Russia and how what we would do. We wouldn't fare against Russia. But I don't think, we're not really that sick and tired of war, because you have the terrorist agenda still out there. You have the terrorists, terrorists here, terrorists there.
Yeah, but we're finding out the terrorists all work for our own government. ISIS, Al-Qaeda,
exactly.
They're all actors. We're not going to go to war based on a theater presentation as to why we should go to war.
Yeah, that's why I wanted to call about, because I wanted to talk to some information about Asia. Well, did you know that, you already know the Philippines kicked out the U.S. government. Well, now Indonesia just kicked out JP Morgan Bank.
Yes.
After they got their credit rating lowered. And that is the main club member. You know, that's
yes.
the main boy right there. So get ready, and this is just what I think, get ready to see some stuff popping up in Asia. Because I don't think Russia is the big problem. The only reason they have those troops there is that takes away troops. That takes away troops from Russia to where they can be using to actually, you know, help stabilize these other countries, just like China is doing in Africa. That's why Boko Haram hasn't really been able to spread, because China goes over there, tells the governments, look, let us have your resources, but at the same time,
we'll
build you cities and everything.
Okay, well, unfortunately, we've run out of time. I'm going to respond to you after the break for station identification. So thank you very much. We'll be right back. And welcome back to our show. Hour number 2. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. Responding to Josh here, where he's talking about the possibility that NATO and the U.S. are building up all these forces along the border with Russia to the west in order to weaken Russia's forces to the east and allow some kind of an attack from that direction. I disagree, because the force reduction is equal on both sides. If you're massing your troops along Europe, that's where your troops are. Now, something else we need to consider is that the U.S. government appears to be making the same strategic mistake the Nazis did in the closing months of World War II, where they realized they don't have enough manpower, they certainly don't have enough committed manpower, and they began to overemphasize the development and use of their high-technology weapons. And they did create some amazing things for the time, but ultimately they couldn't produce them in enough volume to change the outcome of the war because of the cost involved. Because, yes, we can build an F-35 fighter, but we can't build a lot of them. We can build the Gerald R. Ford, but we can't build very many of them. And so that mitigates against a U.S. victory. All right, back to the phones. Peter in Los Angeles, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yeah, hi, Mike. I just wanted to say Happy New Year, and I'm calling to ask your advice. I'm totally confused. I'm not exactly sure which I should be more terrified of, ISIS or the Russians, and I wanted to hear I'm just beside myself and
well, I'm
I'm
not afraid of the Russians unless the U.S. provokes them. I'm afraid of ISIS, if Washington, D.C. decides that they need a terror attack here in Hawaii.
No, it was a joke, but obviously, but it's really ridiculous. And I wanted to mention something. I spent a whole lot of time in the Army, and went through a lot of iterations. Went in as a draftee, went to OCS. Went up the chain a little bit, and was in the Middle East in 1991 and 90, and back in the early 2000s, then back as a contractor. And one of the things that a lot of people don't understand that happened under Dick Cheney, Defense Secretary Dick Cheney. When we were downsizing, remember when people talked about the peace benefit and all that?
The peace dividend, I remember that.
We went down from like 18 divisions to 10 and things of that nature. But when that happened, and it was different in 1991, when I first went in, it was an enlisted man, and when you do KP, Mike, and a private or a corporal was doing KP, and some mess sergeant was telling you what to do, and the private probably made $500 a month. When I first went in, we had battalion after battalion of transportation trucking battalions that handle all of our logistics and so on and so forth. And those drivers were generally PFCs and E2s, E3s, making $500, $600 a month. when I went back over as a contractor, and I was the HR, had a big HR job for one of the contractors that had all the trucking and all the mess halls, by the way.
Yes.
And when I was an enlisted man back in the 70s, those PFCs that were doing the ladling out the mashed potatoes had been replaced with contractors who were making about $80,000 to $90,000 a year.
Yeah, I remember seeing about that and how soldiers were actually forbidden to do their own laundry because Kellogg, Brown and Root and all of that
That's
stuff.
That's who I was with.
Okay. Well, I didn't mean to blow your cover on that. I have a family member who was in Iraq when all this stuff was going on down and did survive. He was saying that, the water that was being delivered to them by these contractors was absolutely vile.
That was Route 2, Mike.
I'm sorry?
We had all the water.
Yeah.
KBR had all the water. We supplied all the water to not only all the U.S., but all the coalition troops. All the food and all the mess halls, that was all us. All the trucking. And by the way, on that, we did also the laundry. It was the largest military contract in the history of the world called LogCap.
Yes.
And I was the HR guy, but I would also tell you that they weren't allowed to do their own laundry. That's right. And let me tell you what we charged for that, Mike. Take a U.S. GI laundry bag about the size of a pillowcase, and you turn those in, and KBR charged the U.S. Army $100 for each laundry bag full of stuff. And we supplied water, which made people sick.
Yes.
It was awful.
It was a racket. It was all about making the money and bleeding the American taxpayer and making these war profiteers rich. And to complete my side of the story about the water was so vile that the soldiers were all dumping Kool-Aid and anything else in there to make it palatable. And, of course, when you add those chemicals in there, it doesn't really hydrate you properly. And so our standard gift to anybody that we knew was serving in that area was a big Brita water pitcher and a whole box of replacement filters. And they were very grateful to get that because it made the water tolerable, if not actually tasty. They go through those filters very, very fast because there was so much crud in that water. And again, I think back to that famous speech by Patton, which George C. Scott repeated at the beginning of the movie of Patton, where he talks about how the American Army has the finest equipment, the best food, and so forth. And that used to be a point of pride for military logistics. And now they're just being sent whatever crud somebody can make money off of. There was that big stink over the body armor, where the guy, it turned out the body armor was rapidly decaying when the soldiers would sweat into it. And the guy who was selling this body armor to the U.S. government was this multi-millionaire, spent something like $10 million on his daughter's bat mitzvah, had all these rock stars attending it. And yet the soldiers were being told they were not allowed to wear any other body armor but this stuff that was being supplied. And they all knew it was crud. It wasn't going to work. And, families were getting together. We even talked about pooling our money and getting some of the really good dragon scale body armor, which is what the officers were all wearing, and sending it to our family member in there. And he was basically told if he wore anything other than this particular body armor, which was really kind of useless, and he did get killed, his family would not get the death benefits. So, it was just all about making the money and feeding the money to certain connected people. And we saw a lot of the same thing during Vietnam, where they were happy to grind up helicopters and things because it was just a way of soaking the American people for all this vast amount of money.
Mike, can I tell one more about trucking?
Yes.
Again, back when I first went into the military, PFCs and privates would drive trucks, and they made $500 a month. KBR had all the trucking contracts, and even the beginning invasion of Iraq in 2003, when they actually followed the spearheads, which was a reasonably conventional situation at that time.
Yes.
all those were KBR truck drivers, and the difference was they made about $125,000, and that was back in 2003. Each truck driver, rather than the $500 PFC. And they were also not subject to UCMJ. And where I had been there in Desert Storm, when they were still GIs driving those trucks, if the trucks didn't make it through, say they were getting a mortar barrage or whatever, and these guys refused to go through it, literally I had the power to take them out and shoot them in a combat situation. You know, cowardice and face the enemy and all that. But with the KVR truckers, they could quit right then and there, and there was nothing you could do. And the spearheads or the poor guy at the end of the logistical train, actually fighting, could be starved because these guys just refused to go for any further, and that happened as well. And but starting when they downsized the military back in '93 under Cheney and Clinton, Cheney in '93 and then Clinton thereafter, they outsourced everything. And so
the army may have been the army may have been downsized, but the cost of maintaining it went up.
Exactly. And where war is the business of the United States, we made it so inefficient that we can't even do that right anymore.
Yeah.
So, it's ridiculous, Mike, and what can I tell you?
Well,
but listen. Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
No, go ahead and finish.
I was just going to tell you Happy New Year, and I've got to take off and pick up my daughter.
Well, Happy New Year. I'm glad you survived your military experience, and go get your daughter. Don't want her worrying, about where Daddy is.
Thanks, Mike.
All right, we're going to let you go here. Now then, a couple of days ago, we had a story that may have a bearing. First of all, I got to do a shout-out to our on-air affiliates who are just rejoining our network. I forgot to do that. We were in the middle of a phone call. A couple of days ago, we were reporting on this story about how all 10 of the active United States aircraft carriers are currently in port. And the story was being put out there. They're all sitting ducks because they're in their home ports. Everybody knows where they are. And I am concerned that what may be going on is that all of these ships are being provisioned for a possible sea lane war. That's the only reason to have everything back in port at the same time is you're loading them all up and getting ready to go. So I am very concerned, and I know a lot of people are very, very concerned, and I certainly do not want to have to go through a world war, especially one that's potentially nuclear, because we have a first strike target sitting right outside this window. So I've told Mike in our control room to have a best of tape standing by just in case I disappear in a blinding flash of light. Let's go back to the phones here. Ernest in Reno, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Mike, Mike, I'd like to, I hear you mention a lot about the Soviet collapse.
Yes.
And that this might happen to us, and it might be something that would work for us, but there's a big difference between them collapsing and us collapsing. That, first of all, there's a lot of people that question whether that was a real collapse or it was staged, because the core of the KGB remained intact. So it's questionable whether that was legitimate.
Well, do you remember when World War II was over in Europe, and because we were talking about General Patton before, he came under a huge amount of criticism because despite the program of denazification, he was hiring a lot of these old Nazi officers to basically continue in the same job they'd been doing. And he explained it away by saying, if you show me somebody else who knows how to do the job as well as these guys, I'll replace them. But until we can find them, I need people who can do the job, and these are the ones. And I think when the Russian republics were being formed, they had much of the same attitude. There was a lot of deadwood and hardliners who were allowed to go, but those who could still do their job efficiently were very much needed, and they were kept on. And I think that's really all there is to it. I don't think the collapse of the Soviet Union was staged. Certainly it did not work in the United States' interests because immediately the American people said, well, if the Cold War is definitely over, it's time for a peace dividend. We want you to spend our tax money on the American nation, the American people. And, of course, the military-industrial complex said, no, we can't do that. We've got to have another enemy to wag at the people.
You know, if you look at it from that viewpoint that it might have been staged, then you see that if it's a long-term thing, then that's basically, if you're a globalist and you're planning long-term, then that means that we're going to stop with the communist threat, and we're going to...
okay, well, first of all, hang on. The Russian republics are not a communist nation. In fact, the only nation that still has that was a long time ago. The only nation that still has an active communist party today is the United States. So,
right. But Mike, what I'm saying is that now it's time. We're going to have a terrorist threat that's going to be the new boogeyman. See, if this is a long-term plan of a globalist plan, I mean, there's people. If you've heard of Joe Skousen, I mean, this is the kind of thing that they're saying is that around this time, this era, 2017 to 2022, that's when the attack is going to be provoked. And that's what we're seeing now, because the globalists think that they have the advanced weaponry, that they're going to go hide in their bunkers. They're going to provoke a first strike, a massive first strike. They're going to come out, and whatever's left, they're going to go ahead and neutralize the threat. That's the thought of people that are watching this in a long-term
well, I think you may be watching too long a term because you're missing the very significant changes that have been happening in the short term. And yes, the globalists are desperate that their dreams of a new world order are collapsing in front of them. They've been wagging terrorists at us for a very long time to try and control us, but now most people are now aware that these terrorists are, in fact, state actors, most of them working for the United States government. And frankly, it feels to me like the military-industrial complex or the globalists, war with Russia is like their desperation Hail Mary pass, and it's not been fully thought out. And again, it's been a hallmark of our government for the last 10 years. They don't think things all the way through to the end, to all possible outcomes. And I think they're just reacting out of panic and fear, and they're going to get this nation into a whole big mess of trouble.
Right. Or things are happening that they didn't anticipate, that maybe we did wake up a little bit too soon.
That is definitely true. That is definitely true.
Mike, a thing that you have to worry about is that there are a sizable amount of UN troops in this country.
Yes.
And if you station a lot of our troops outside this country, that is a set-up situation right there you have to be concerned about.
Well, the UN is really good, and they've got a really long track record of going on into other countries like Haiti, throwing their weight around, giving them illnesses, and the rest of it. The UN troops here in the United States of America, where 80% of Americans own a firearm, I think it's going to be really dangerous. The United Nations does not have justification to come into the United States and start throwing its weight around, especially with all this talk we're getting out of Washington, D.C. about leaving the United Nations. That would end any legitimate legal pretense for the UN to be here at all. And at this point, given that the United Nations has been totally impotent in reining in the behavior of Israel, I'm in favor of getting the United States out of the UN, having them relocate their headquarters someplace else, and kicking out all these UN troops. I think that would be a really, really good thing to do here. But as far as the war with Russia is concerned, uncategorically, it's a mistake, and we're going to lose.
Yeah, I agree, but that could have been the whole thing, that this could be their to blow everything up, that they could just go ahead, start the war, create a chaos in this country, and set the UN and whoever sleepers they might have in here, just set them loose.
Do you remember Occam's razor? Do you remember Occam's razor?
No, I didn't.
Okay, it's a saying by William of Ockham that when you're given a variety of explanations for something that you're witnessing, the simplest one is usually going to be the true one. And so I sort of avoid these over-convoluted, dark theories of players at remote distances that we can't get to, and prefer to see the cause of all of our issues is right in our own government buildings, certainly in those private central banks. And in any event, I got to let you go here because we got to take a break for commercials. And when we come on back, boy, the phone lines are lining up. Bill and Hillary Clinton are going to attend Donald Trump's inauguration. Apparently, the Clintons are finally accepting that they lost, and I think Trump's security detail ought to be doing body cavity searches on the Clintons and the Bushes before letting them anywhere near the festivities. We'll be right back. Hello, hi, America. Welcome back to the show. Now, it is essential from the position of the U.S. government that a potential war with Russia be somehow made to look like it's Russia's fault. Either there's a false flag where, oh my goodness, they've attacked us, they sank the USS Maine in Havana Harbor, they fired torpedoes in the Gulf of Tonkin, whatever lie comes to mind. Or alternatively, that our plan to attack Russia is part of an evil Russian plot to lure us into our doom, so forth and so on. But the attempt is out there that Putin wants to be master of the world. Let's get practical. Europe is an economic basket case. So is the United States. The infrastructure is worn down. Certainly in the U.S., our manufacturing base is all but gone. Our agricultural lands are poisoned with GMO pollen. Why would Putin want to take over these crippled areas of the world? He wouldn't. What's the point? I mean, some months back, somebody tried to plant the idea that Russia was getting ready for a sneak attack to take back Alaska. And Putin's response to that was classic. He said, why would we want Alaska? We have enough frozen wasteland as it is in Siberia. There's really not much here in the United States or in Europe that makes war advantageous for the Russians. It's because the U.S. and Europe are basket cases that it is the U.S. and NATO that are pushing for this war. Little common sense for you to think about here. All right, we're going to switch over to the phones again here. Phil in Montreal, aloha. Thank you for waiting. What's on your mind?
Hello.
Hello.
Yes. Hi, Mike. How are you? I know you're good. Listen, I've been, usually I try and throw in my 2 cents, but today I'm looking for a bit of information. All the soldiers that were caught in Aleppo, 230 U.S. soldiers and the British and the French and a couple of people from the Netherlands, whatever happened to those? I haven't seen a hint, a headline, a story about...
They were allowed to go home. They were allowed to go home. The position of all those nations is that these people were merely observers and not engaged in combat. And Assad, in order to not have the situation escalate, said, oh, yes, I believe you. Absolutely, they were just observers, and you can have them back. And that was the end of that.
Oh, kidding. Wow. Okay, I didn't see anything about it, so I thank you for... that was going through my mind because I thought that maybe it would turn out to be a problem that Trump would have to work out anyway.
Well, once Trump is in office, all of these foreign interventions are going to be ramping down. He campaigned on a no more covert or overt foreign interventions. We've got problems in this country that need to be fixed, and that's why Americans voted for him. So I think once Trump is in office, U.S. support for the rebels in Syria are going to, it's going to evaporate. All of these places where the U.S. is running these covert groups attempting to overthrow the government, Trump's going to pull the plug on it. We have problems to deal with here at home, and let's be very honest, this agenda of conquering the Middle East has been a complete abject failure. The U.S. lost this one. They're losing in Syria. They're barely hanging on in Libya and Yemen, even with the use of proxies. Everybody understands the U.S. has been using ISIS and Al-Qaeda to affect foreign policy and leave the U.S. government blameless. It's failed. It has failed. It's time to accept that and pull back and say, all right, we're going to be better behaved from this point on.
You know, the U.S. media really makes it very difficult to get to the truth.
That's their job.
I'm just looking at a story about the Iranian missile landing 1,500 yards from a U.S. aircraft carrier. H.S. Newman when those two, inflatable boats with the soldiers were captured by the Iranians. And here the story is told what they were up to. They were up to delivering a new ISIS leader to replace somebody that had been killed, and the Iranians got wind of it.
Okay. Well, that makes a lot of sense. I mean, that whole thing. All right, well, listen, I'm going to have to let you go and take a break for commercials. We'll be back with more phone calls and more news after these few words. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. We're going to do some news, and then we're going to get back to the phones. The phone lines are loaded up here. I'm really beginning to like Kellyanne Conway. And she's basically out there. Hillary and the Hillaryites are still out there screaming about how could we possibly lose? It was Russian hacking. It was this. It was that. And Kellyanne Conway says to Hillary Clinton, you lost because nobody likes you. And that really is what it all comes down to, because all the advertising in the world is not going to sell a product people don't like. Remember the Edsel? Remember New Coke? The advertising is great, but if there isn't something there people want to buy, it's not going to work. And that's where that $1.6 billion went, trying to sell a product nobody wanted. Now, those people out in Hollywood who did all those things about, like the video for the electors, vote your conscience, and as it turned out they did, 7 of them turned on Hillary. Now they're out there with Humanity for Progress. They used to be Humanity for Hillary. They've rebranded because she lost. And they've got another video full of these Hollywood has-beens demanding that Congress oppose the incoming president. Now, what's going on here is very simple. There's a lot of politics in Hollywood, and you're either in with the ins or you're out with the outs. And all of these celebrities bet their bankability on a Hillary victory. Now, if you don't know what I mean by that, when it comes to the starring roles in motion pictures and TV shows, producers look at the star's bankability, which is a general term meaning if we put this person into our show, how many people will come to see our movie or tune into our TV show just because that person is in there. That's called bankability. That's why some major stars get put into movies that they're really inappropriate for. They're there to draw audience into something that might otherwise be a turkey. And all of these celebrities in Hollywood bet their bankability on a Hillary victory and stood with her, because with Hillary in the White House, then the liberals would be ascendant in Hollywood, and their stardom would be assured. And they bet wrong. And now they're all starting to feel like I felt 22 years ago, when all of a sudden you realize Hollywood's kind of looking the other way because you were on the losing side. And we're going to start seeing the rise of conservatism in Hollywood. And conservative talent is going to start getting those starring roles. Now, the Democrats are trying to create their own Tea Party movement. Probably not going to go anywhere, simply because the Democrats have shown themselves to be the antithesis of everything that led to the real original Tea Party. They're thrashing around, basically, is what's going on. And apparently the Democratic National Committee is building a war room to battle President-elect Donald Trump, to pressure the new Republican administration on a variety of policy matters, and keep trying to put a focus on Russia's alleged cyber attacks that influenced the 2016 election. They're still not letting go. The crybabies are not going to quit. They're going to spend the next 8 years saying, Russia stole the election for Trump. Russia stole the election for Trump. And there's no amount of evidence that is ever going to convince them, because it's an article of faith with them. And I look at this war room, I look at these Hollywood celebrities going on out saying that you have to oppose Donald Trump. Does any of this come under the heading of fomenting rebellion? Because I think they're dangerously close to that right now. They could, in theory, start a civil war between the liberals with their pastel hairdos and the conservatives with their guns. Apparently, California has hired Eric Holder to lead the fight against Donald Trump in regards to maintaining its status as a sanctuary city, a sanctuary state, rather. And again, the war between Trump and the establishment is apparently continuing, and Trump is going to need all of us, you and I, standing shoulder to shoulder with him, to remind this entrenched oligarchical establishment that we, the people, are the highest authority in this land. And everybody who's in that government is supposed to be a public servant, not a public master. And anybody who doesn't want to play by the rules, anybody who doesn't want to comply with the Bill of Rights, the honorable thing to do is resign. What am I saying? Honorable. That was a momentary lapse on my part. All right, we're going to go back to the phones here. Mark in Philadelphia, thank you for waiting. What's on your mind?
Michael, yes, Michael. Happy New Year. A little side note. A friend of mine who's a machinist, who he worked in Fort Worth making the F-16s. He worked there for like 15 years from the mid-'80s to the late '90s. And he told me something recently that was really shocking to me. At the time he left, there were 3,000 machinists making parts for the F-16. He says today there are 25, because most of the people that work there are assemblers. That would be for Lockheed Martin,
yes.
Formerly General Dynamics. Okay, I get this. I said, well, how can they still make all this? He says it's all made everywhere else, and then it's shipped over as sub-assemblies and then assembled
yes.
at the facility that he formerly worked at.
Yes.
So one of the things that Trump really ought to do, my understanding is he wants to get behind the F-18 Hornet, and I think that's a great idea, versus going with the F-35, which is a total disaster. And I think that is a disaster that was planned to suck our money out of our pockets.
Well, that's what all of these weapons from the military-industrial complex are about, sucking money out of our pockets. That's why they're hideously expensive, cost-plus, and Trump is holding them to account on that. And the same thing with the F-22, and they look good in the air shows, but they're being built in this idea they're never really going to have to be used, so it doesn't matter whether they really work or not. And now we're looking at the possibility of a real war that's going on with that. And this idea of offshoring all these components for these weapon systems raises another strategic weakness of the United States. In the event of war, those supply lines could easily be cut. Because if our factories that are making turbine blades for the F-16 are located somewhere in Indonesia, how easy is it to send a cruise missile in and blow up that factory?
Right, and on that note, there was also the ordeal about the chemical warfare suits from the first Gulf War that that the guys that got the contract, eventually they caught up with them, but they made enormous amounts of money, and it was the suits were substandard, and they did not protect our men from the chemical, which the chemicals were there in the first go around with Iraq. So, but I'd like to ask you, what really happened? What really happened? This is the year, on June 8th of 1967, 50 years ago, we will have an anniversary of this year, June 8th of 2017, of what happened to the USS Liberty. And I want to know if Trump knows that Israel, our greatest buddy ally, attacked our Liberty and killed 34 of our men and wounded over 170 of them. They intended to sink the ship during the Six-Day War and make it look like Egypt had attacked us and sank the ship. And also, people need to know, and this is what totally shocked me, McNamara, the Secretary of Defense, along with Lyndon B. Johnson, they told the fleet to stand down when the SOS went out to help for help and aid to come to the ship.
They did.
So we need to beat the drum on that in preparation, because the guys, there are still survivors from that ship, from the Liberty, and they're putting together a movie, and I encourage you to help me beat the drum. I'm going to put the word out as much as I can. And my fellow countrymen, we really need to know what happened to the USS Liberty. That really another congressional investigation, a real investigation, needs to happen. And if Trump can push that, and I don't know if he will, but maybe he doesn't even know about the truth. But anyway, I'll leave it at that. Thank you very much, Michael, and Happy New Year.
All right, Happy New Year to you as well here. And as far as the USS Liberty, or for that matter, 9/11, or any of that, we don't need another government investigation. It's a waste of taxpayer money and gives them another chance to try and polish up the lies. I do not cede to the United States Congress my right to come to my own conclusions based on the evidence before my eyes. I know Israel attacked the USS Liberty and tried to frame Egypt for it. I know that 9/11 was a false flag. I know that there was no Spanish mine in Havana Harbor. I know that there were no torpedoes in the Gulf of Tonkin, that one incident. I know that there were weapons on the Lusitania. We have to stop giving the government the power to tell us that what we know is what we know. We have to pull back on that. Now, getting on back to the issue of false flag terror by Israel, my concern would be the upcoming meeting on the 15th of this month in Paris. Because, as you know, representatives of some 70 nations are getting together to basically talk about granting recognized international statehood status to Palestine, which Israel does not want to see happen. That's why they were so furious over the United Nations Security Council vote. And so I'm expecting that dangerous Muslim terrorists, or maybe the evil Russians, will blow something up in Paris that's really, really big. Because this is how Israel likes to play the game. All right, back to the phones here. Janet in South Florida, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hello?
Hello, you're on the air.
I lost you there for a second. Hi, Mike. I haven't been here for a while. Earlier today, I came across an article on SGT report regarding the carriers being brought to port. And I was going to call in, and then you brought it up, and several other callers called in. But this particular article is titled Treason of the Highest Order and Why is Obama Still in Office, regarding the decommissioning of all the naval carriers that have been brought into port at the same time. This is treason, and it is a national suicide.
They're not being decommissioned. I don't know why that article says that. They're not being decommissioned. Two of them were all...
The virtual decommissioning. I think that changes it. But the whole point of this article is a comparison. It's a parallel to what took place in Pearl Harbor when all the planes were lined up and they knew what was going to happen. 300 commanders have been removed from the Navy. When questioned, would you be prepared to turn against the American people? And if they said no, they were thrown out. 300 of the top commanders. And now this article questions, why is the military not doing something at this point when all the naval carriers are brought in from the sea and to a port?
Well, first of all, I want to back up to a comment you made. There's a difference between our current carriers being at their home ports and Pearl Harbor. On Pearl Harbor, what was left in the harbor for Japan to bomb was junk, leftovers from earlier wars. The USS Arizona was basically at the end of its lifespan. The sister ship, the Utah, had already been taken off combat status and was being used for gunnery training for brand new Navy crews. All of the modern ships, the carriers and their high-speed escorts, had been sent out of Pearl Harbor deep to the south, supposedly on a probing mission. But the reality was Roosevelt wanted them out of the way, because what was left for Japan to bomb was old stuff that really wasn't all that useful anymore. It wasn't going to be useful in a war against Japan. So that hardware was sacrificed along with all the people who died at Pearl Harbor. I don't think Obama intends to sacrifice our 10 frontline carriers. I think that the most likely explanation is they're all being reprovisioned, fully supplied, just loaded up to the deck with supplies for a prolonged deployment to the ocean.
Okay. I still think otherwise, but thank you.
Well, we agree to disagree there. Thank you very much. We're going to switch over to Karen in Maryland. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hello there. Good afternoon. Okay. I would like to know whether or not any of to your knowledge, I know that Maryland does not, do any of the 50 states tie their Republican, Democrat candidates to the Republican Democrat party platform, because my position is that if the parties are not going to adhere to their platforms, and what that means is that they're not going to require their candidates to conform in some way to their platforms, then they ought to get rid of their platforms. Either the platform is a suggestion, it's a website decoration, or it's something that they're going to stick to in whole or in part.
Well, the platform is basically an advertising gimmick that it's put together, and it makes it look like this is a consensus position of all of the members of the party. This is what we're going to be pushing for, and our candidate will support this platform. But history shows that very often those platforms are pretty much thrown in the trash right after Election Day, and that certainly was the case with Obama, who ran on a platform plank of ending these wars and bringing our people home. Because the platform is basically considered advertising for the campaign, it's actually considered protected by the First Amendment. And there have actually been attempts at lawsuits to sue politicians who will promise one thing to get elected and then immediately do something else once they're in office. And the courts have ruled consistently that political speech, even if it's inaccurate and a lie, is protected by the First Amendment. And right now, I'm glad they set that precedent, because the coming attacks on the independent media, they're not going to be able to say, well, we think it's a lie, therefore it should be silenced, because we'll just come back and say when politicians lie during the campaign, the courts have said it's protected speech under the First Amendment.
Okay. So it's looked upon and seen as protected. Okay. So to your knowledge, there are no states that tie their candidates to the party platform.
Not to my knowledge. I would be overjoyed to find out I'm wrong on this issue. But again, the platform is just a campaign promise. It's a more formalized, dressed-up campaign promise, but that's all it is.
Okay, well, all right. There you go. Okay, thank you.
All right, thank you. And we're going to try and squeeze in Bob in Las Vegas before the commercial break. What's on your mind?
Oh, hey, Mike. I hope you can hold me over.
Okay.
During the commercial. I wanted to thank that previous caller, Mark from Philadelphia, regarding the fallen of the USS Liberty. Yeah, thank you for what you're doing. Yeah, these guys can't be forgotten. Those that were killed and those that survived this horrific attack.
All right, Bob, I'm going to have to put you on hold. Don't hang up. I'll come right back to you after these few words. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. We're going to go back to Bob in Las Vegas. And, Bob, take it away.
Yeah, Mike, thanks. I'd like to hear, before I get to my last 2 points, I'd like to hear if our friend Mike from Brazil is listening. I'd love to hear his view on what happened in Brazil to Dilma Rousseff and that whole affair. So, moving on, you mentioned, Mike, that you said Trump is the most naive president entering office.
I didn't say that. I didn't say that. I said he is as dangerously naive as Jimmy Carter. We may have had more naive presidents in the past, but I haven't made a study of that.
Okay, but Trump, you recall during the campaign, he referenced these dancing Arabs. Hasn't he ever heard of the dancing Israelis in New Jersey? I mean, this is a pretty well-known story, and he kept referring to these dancing Arabs. I admit they were dancing Arabs in the Palestinian territories and in other parts of the Muslim world. But as far as dancing Arabs in the U.S., I don't remember seeing that. I do recall.
No, they didn't, and it turned out the video of the dancing Palestinians was another media hoax, because what they had were videotapes from a food distribution. Where food was being given to the Palestinians, and it was like a couple of months old. It was outdated, but they just we need Palestinians cheering, and that's what they put on the TV on 9/11.
Okay. Yeah, and then on this upcoming meeting in Paris, I too fear some sort of event. But you said Russian terrorism. I fear quote-unquote Palestinian terrorism. And I don't know if you've heard this story. Have you ever heard about I'm sure you've heard of the Abu Nidal group headed by Abu Nidal.
Yes.
And there are stories that he was actually controlled by the Mossad.
Yes, I've heard that through several sources.
Okay. I mean, that's what I'm afraid of, a group that's controlled by the outwardly Palestinian, but controlled by the Mossad, and they could potentially do something at this event to further tarnish the Palestinians.
Okay, let's play a little game here. Let's play a little game here. Look for what should be there and isn't. Tell me what's missing from that scenario.
A reason for the Palestinians to do it.
Bingo! You get an A+ and a gold star on your record today.
Okay.
You're learning. Congratulations.
Yeah.
I'm proud of you.
I got the best professor. I got the best professor in the world.
Well, thank you very much.
All right, thank you, Mike.
All right, thanks an awful lot here. We're going to start with Scott in Norfolk. Thank you for waiting so patiently to get on the phone here. We may have to take you through station identification. What's on your mind?
Hello, Mike. I just wanted to make a quick comment about the aircraft carriers. Could it be that things are so bad between us and Russia that we're getting our carriers out of the way of those missiles that they have? You know, the ones that can go so fast that we can't stop, the aircraft carriers can't stop them. The carrier killers.
Well, that's certainly possible. I mean, there was that huge embarrassment. We got to take a break for station identification. Don't go away, Scott. Going to be right back. Hello, hi, America. Welcome back to our show, hour number 3. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. We've had a lot of very interesting discussions with the callers today here. And before I go back to Scott, somebody made a comment in the chat room that one of the problems that Trump may be dealing with is that he does rely on InfoWars as a source. And, of course, as we all know, InfoWars never says anything critical about Israel at all. So maybe Donald needs to broaden his selection of sources a little bit more. Now, getting on back to Scott here, your concern is valid. The American carriers are vulnerable. There was a lot of discussion back in 2015 about how vulnerable the carriers are to modern weapons. And a part of this came out of a naval exercise involving a French submarine called the Saphir, that was able to get inside the carrier screen of the carrier Theodore Roosevelt and simulate its sinking along with 2 of the escorts. And this led to a discussion which basically asked the question, in a real shooting war with Russia, how long will our carriers last? And the final opinion that came in from the Navy was 2 weeks, 3 if you leave them in the port. So the U.S. has invested vast sums of money building the weapons that won the last World War and not thinking outside the box and moving forward into the weaponry appropriate for the Third World War, and that is actually a huge weakness. Now, that being said, I don't think the carriers had to go all the way to their home ports just to be out of range of those Russian missiles or the Chinese silkworm or any of those other ship killers. Right now, with the carriers all in port, the Mideast is basically left unguarded. The Mediterranean is left unguarded. There are other U.S. ships there, but none with the capability of launching aircraft, just missiles. So, go ahead.
Michael, could this be the opening Obama's giving Israel to do what they want in the Middle East between now and the inauguration?
Obama would not order the carriers in against Israel anyway. So I really don't think that is a factor. I think the most likely explanation is the carriers are in their home ports being fully loaded with provisions and fuel for a coming long deployment of some kind. And it may well be against Russia or China. But it is very unusual. In fact, it's against U.S. naval doctrine to have all the carriers home ported at the same time. There's always 2 or 3 of them at sea, basically running, not at war condition, but definitely on alert.
Well, it's definitely interesting. I wonder if we'll ever hear the truth about it.
Probably not. But we'll let the future historians figure that out. Anyway, Scott, thanks an awful lot for the phone call. We're going to join John in Rancho Cucamonga. What's on your mind?
Good afternoon, Michael. How you doing?
I'm fine. You're on the air. What's on your mind?
Okay. I just wanted to make a few minor comments about the previous discussion relative to the dancing Arabs versus the real dancing Israelis on the culmination of the 9/11 activities. And the guy that set Donald J. Trump correct in a public forum, and I guess the gathering was in Michigan late last year, was my friend Marty Hill. I know he listens to your show every day, and he does write some articles for you.
Mm-hmm.
And I think he'll get a chuckle out of this. But
hi, Marty.
He did. He did in a very loud. I don't know if he had a megaphone or some artificial contrivance, but he did say it so loud that the whole room could hear it. And of course, the security people, Marty told me, escorted him to the door. But they were very nice about it, and they didn't put his hands on him too much. And even Trump told him, "Hey, he's one of us," believe it or not. So,
yeah, no, I remember that very, very clearly. And again, Trump was campaigning, and he's saying the things he thinks that his supporters want to hear. But now that he's got the job, and again, his view of Israel and Palestine has been shaped far too much by corporate media, which includes InfoWars. I think after just a few months of dealing with the reality of what the Israeli government is like, what Netanyahu is like, I think we're going to see Trump's enthusiasm for Israel quickly cool, and might even be before the anniversary of the attack on the USS Liberty.
I hope you're right, Michael. I just have a hard time coming to completely being satisfied with your descriptive adjective about he's the most naive person since Jimmy Carter. I don't see how someone can play with the big boys who have a certain ethnic persuasion and money men and bankers and all of these people and do quite well at it and be in the financial position he's in and know all the people he knows, such as Larry Silverstein, and have even a modicum of accuracy being accorded to him being slightly naive.
Well, let me respond to that. Let me respond to that. Again, even though we know there is a lot of fraud on Wall Street, by and large, people from the world of business, and this does include Larry Silverstein and the people at Goldman Sachs, they have to keep their promises or they're not going to be in business much longer. And Donald Trump, unfortunately, is going into Washington, D.C., expecting that same kind of I can take your word about things. And it's very, very different in Washington, D.C. It's very, very different in Tel Aviv. I know that a huge part of his support for Israel is because of the backing of Sheldon Adelson. But Donald Trump is not inflexible. He's not dogmatic or doctrinally locked in. And I think he's going to adapt very quickly to the reality as it presents himself. And again, I could be wrong, but I don't get a sense that Trump is going to be very tolerant of the way Israel behaves, certainly toward him. The fact that Israel definitely wanted Hillary over him, and certainly the Israeli media, they were openly hostile to him, just the same way as the American media. So I think we'll see Donald Trump cool on that very, very quickly. Look at Barack Obama. Barack Obama, it's almost a good thing he's leaving office, because he's obviously reached the point of being just totally fed up with having to deal with Netanyahu. And I think that non-veto of the UN Security Council vote on Palestine was Obama's flipping the bird at Netanyahu on his way out the door.
Right. Yeah, well, that's a couple of key points you made there, Michael, so I have to say I do agree with those. But anyway,
time will solve that mystery. Well,
it sure will. First 100 days, give them the first 100 days anyway. Maybe even 6 months. I don't know.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay,
exactly. We got to let him actually get in there and test fly the thing before we find out if it's going to work or not. Okay. Thank you very much. We're going to let you go. Do a shout out to our on-air affiliates just rejoining the network. And speaking of test fly, another movie I'm going to suggest to you, Sully, which is about that pilot who had to drop the airplane into the Hudson River. Big, huge historical event. The movie stars Tom Hanks as the pilot, directed by Clint Eastwood, which he's turned into an amazing director. He really has. And it's on pay-per-view now, so that's another one that you can watch. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and actually do some news. Ooh, what a novelty here. So getting on back to the issue of the real media versus the fake media. and which is which, and we're starting to get an object lesson. There's an article over here at the Ron Paul Institute, no less. Facts or fakes, can we trust the the Post? And it basically goes back about how in November, the Washington Post printed an article accusing 200 independent media organizations of being fake news sites doing the bidding of the Kremlin. My site was one of them. The Washington Post evidence? They had none, and they had to walk the story back. Then Friday, they had that report that the Russians had hacked a power station in Vermont. And then it turned out the Washington Post hadn't even called the power station to find out. They had to walk that story back as well. Their credibility is crumbling. And now we're hearing, as it turns out, that laptop that was supposed to be infected with malware from Russia that wasn't connected to the grid, huzzah, huzzah, turns out the malware hadn't been there after all. It was just made up out of thin air. Russia's bad, Russia's bad, Russia's bad. Anyway. We already talked about how CNN was caught using footage from a video game to bolster its report on Russian hacking. They were presenting it as, see, this is the Russian malware, and people recognized it as being part of a video game here. Now, Trump is pledging he will continue to communicate directly to the American people, bypassing the corporate media, because he knows they are hostile to him. Even after he won the election, MSNBC was selectively editing reports on his tweets to change their meaning. And so Trump has announced his primary means of communication with the American people are going to be through Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. I presume that media company that his son-in-law is starting, and of course Trump and his people are always welcome over here. But as it's put by this story over in Zero Hedge, we're seeing a war not just against the independent media, but against alternative information, where the government is now spending huge amounts of your money, $160 million, to try and shut down any source of any information that challenges the official Washington, D.C. version of reality. They're trying to cement the matrix in place. Just jam that little metal thing in the back of your skull and all will be well. All right, let's grab a phone call. Al in Canada. Aloha, Al. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, Mike. I hope you and Claire had a wonderful New Year.
We did.
That's fantastic. This turning of events that's happening in your country, Donald Trump's coming in, and he's already done a lot of things. Actually, he did a miraculous number of things. But what I think will be even better if it does happen is one of these. All of these 3-point things that he wanted to do, which is a 5-year ban on White House and congressional officials from becoming lobbyists, a lifetime ban on White House officials, lobbying for foreign governments,
yes,
and a complete ban on foreign lobbyists raising money for American elections. That pretty much cuts out AIPAC now, doesn't it, Mr. Mike?
It's going to limit AIPAC, but AIPAC has evaded being classified as a foreign policy lobby, even though it says right in the name, the America-Israel Political Affairs Committee, but they are not required to register as a lobby for a foreign government, so they may be exempt for a lot of this. But certainly, Donald Trump is slamming that revolving door between officials and lobbyists. He's even banned lobbyists from donating to the inaugural events. He's scaled that way, way back. I think there's going to be 3 inaugural dinners and only 10 parties, which is like less than a third of what Obama did when he came on in there. And he's saying lobbyists are not allowed to donate to inaugural affairs. He's basically bringing down a wall, trying to basically get that corrupting influence of money out of his administration. And he's actually had some people quit his staff because they didn't want to sign that agreement, saying that when I'm done with the Trump White House, I will not be a lobbyist for 5 years. Because being a lobbyist after you've been in the White House, that's the payoff. That's the golden ring there that everybody is striving for. They're not there to serve the American nation, the American people. They're there to make the contacts that they can economically exploit when they move on.
Yeah. Well, the more money you have, the bigger your voice, in American politics.
Well, it didn't start out that way.
There's a lot of bad things about American politics.
Yeah, well, it didn't start out that way. There were laws that actually said every American has an equal voice in the running of this government. There were strict limits on campaign donations so that the size of a candidate's campaign war chest was an actual reflection of their popular support. But over time, the money junkies have eroded away an honest election system and replaced it with a crooked election system. Just like 100 years ago, they wore away at an honest monetary system and replaced it with a crooked monetary system.
Yeah, and now they're resorting to lies.
Well, they've always been doing that.
Even up in here in Canada, there was a story, on one of our major news outlets, CTV, that Russians had hacked the Ontario electrical grid. Alleged. That was the headline in quotations, alleged, because it is still against the law to lie to people, in Canada, through the news.
Ooh, we need one of those. We need one of those down here.
Doesn't that, but just to read that kind of, headline, for some people, they don't see the alleged. You know what I mean? They don't understand what it really means. And all of a sudden the gears start turning, right?
Well, as it turns out, we seem to have hit the stage right now where everybody wants to be hacked by Russia. It's the new status symbol. Ooh, I've been hacked by Russia. I'm trendy. I'm hip. And that story coming out of Ontario, they basically found an IP address in the logs of the computer that is suspected of possibly being one that may have at some point in the past been used by Russia, but it's a generic IP that's used by basically an internet service provider for a lot of honest, legal, law-abiding traffic. And so it's the thinnest of flimsy evidence, but right now, the hip thing is to be able to claim that you were hacked by Russia.
Yes, and John McAfee thinks so as well.
Yes, yeah. Well, everybody who's an actual...
He was the pioneer of antivirus.
He certainly was. We had him on the show. I enjoyed him greatly. He's got a tremendous sense of humor. But everybody who's actually knowledgeable in the field of computer security is out there saying the same thing. The U.S. doesn't have a case. Russia hacking is the 2017 version of Saddam has weapons of mass destruction. It's just another lie to try and start a war with. And we have got to push back against it as hard as we can.
Even simple, critically thinking people that we are, we're not billionaires or any beyond any reasonable doubt. We know that all the really sensitive material is not available online anyway.
Yes.
So, all of this, if there is a hack, it's not a hack. It's someone actually uploading this data onto, a thumb drive or some other means, right?
Well, that's what we're getting from Assange. That's what we're getting from the former U.S. ambassador to Great Britain, who was apparently part of that conduit. Somebody inside the DNC, and it may have been Seth Rich. It may have been the other one, the former CEO, Braverman. It may have been him as well. He hasn't been seen alive since October. And somebody basically took all of that data, put it on a thumb drive, and walked it out of the building and turned it over. And again, William Binney, who was part of the original design team for a lot of this spyware for the NSA, came out and said, if Russia had hacked the DNC or the Podesta or tried to hack the elections, the NSA would have a record of it because everything going across this country is logged by the NSA. So if they don't have it, it's not there.
Fiber optic cables.
They absolutely are.
People have to understand that. They are tapped right into those fiber optic cables. Every single light impulse that passes through those cables goes directly to NSA, and it is categorized.
All right, so everybody needs to start including Arabic words in their emails, and that'll jam up the system.
Yep. Thank you, Mr. Mike.
All right, thanks.
I appreciate your time, sir.
All right,
bye-bye.
Bye-bye. We're going to switch over to Andy in Texas. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Mike. I hope you're having a great time in Hawaii. I spent a whopping 2 hours in the airport coming back from Korea, and I thought it was a beautiful flight in. You switched from green water to blue water, and it was just a fantastic 2 hours I spent there. But what I wanted to say was, wouldn't it just be fantastic if Donald Trump banned the entire corporate media and only answered questions from GCN, RBN, Liberty Roundtable, and all the reporters that are on these stations and stuff, and that way he would keep this legitimate if he did that, because you know these guys, those corporate media, they only ask these stupid questions that really have no relevance, and he's already been pre-warned about the questions. The president's always pre-warned about the questions they're going to ask. Wouldn't that be something? Wouldn't that just put some confidence in the American people?
You know, I think you're right. I think it actually would, because right now Americans have no confidence in the corporate media. For any politician to stand up there and be seen as buddy-buddy with the corporate media taints them. It's all the same pack of liars. I think you're absolutely right that Trump needs to communicate to the public going through the independent media, because right now we're far more trusted than the corporate media is right now. Andy, got to let you go. Got to take a break for commercials. We'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. We're going to go back to the phones to Ed in Michigan. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hello, Mike. Aloha. Can you hear me okay?
I can hear you fine. You're on the air.
Hi. I was just going to add that, William Binney and this Judge Napolitano, these are American heroes, people that are not willing to lay down. And I was just totally blown away by the whole William Binney explanation and past. It would just I just wanted to say that. And okay, in the book by Bill Bonanno and about his father Joe Bonanno.
Yes.
Okay, the guy Johnny Roselli.
Yes.
And the author Tom Wilson, who researched the whole storm drain.
You're talking about the John F. Kennedy assassination.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Well, that's. I just wanted to clarify that for the listeners.
Okay. So what Tom Wilson came up with is that where the government has the car and the exact spot is off, and that the only possible place for somebody to get away with that was through that storm drain and that escape. And actually, this guy was caught right after he was pulled over by a motorcycle cop with a rifle in his hand within 30 minutes of the shooting.
Well, I have a couple of problems with that. First of all, because if you're going to assassinate the president, you get rid of that rifle. You have a disposable weapon. Second, I've been to Dealey Plaza. I've pasted out myself. And I've been to that storm drain. And as near as I can tell, from that point of view, you could not actually see John F. Kennedy because the side of the car would be intervening. Now, the acoustic data indicates a shot from somewhere in the book depository, probably the 5th floor, a shot from the 1st floor of the Daltex building, which was directly to the rear, and, of course, the gunfire from the grassy knoll. And there may have been another shooter on top of the triple overpass. But I've heard about this storm drain story, and I've looked at it, and it just doesn't work for me, okay?
Well, that's why it doesn't work, is because where they are showing the car is off.
Well, we're going to have to agree to disagree on this one, but the one thing that we can all agree on is the government lied to the American people about the true nature of the assassination of John F. Kennedy. Let's just agree on that. We got lied to. The time has come to ask, what are we going to do about that? Are we going to continue to live under a government that lies to us about everything from morning until night, day after day, year after year for our entire lifetimes? frankly, I'm kind of fed up with that, and I certainly don't want the next generation of American children to grow up slave to a government that controls them with lies, fraud, and deception.
The good thing about it is the Internet's waking everybody up to Civics 101, and it's awesome right now.
Well, we're in for a fight this year. I see 2017 as the year of the rise of independent media, but it's not going to happen easily. And the corporate media and the government, they love to play dirty. So there's going to be a fight, and at some point I'm predicting there will be a case that will go all the way to the Supreme Court, affirming that the First Amendment right to freedom of speech applies to every citizen as an individual right. And once you have that established, then they can't ban independent media any longer, or try to ban it any longer.
Well, hey, Mr. Rivero, you keep up the good work, and we're behind you out here. We're listening.
All right. Well, thank you very much. And more than listening, I hope you're sharing what you hear with other people around you, because that is how we bypass the corporate media, by talking to each other. And it annoys the NSA because they can't eavesdrop on a personal conversation just yet. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. And before we take our next phone call, I got an email over the break saying, as long as we're talking about Eric Braverman, the former CEO of the Clinton Foundation, who has not been seen since October, we also need to remember there's another missing person, Brian Pagliano, who, despite having an immunity deal, took the Fifth Amendment when testifying about Hillary Clinton's private email server. He has not been seen for months. He's currently in defiance of a congressional subpoena. Now, maybe these two are in witness protection, cooperating, or maybe, like so many others on the dead bodies list, they are now dead and their bodies carefully hidden, because in the last months of the campaign, there were a lot of people turning up dead under very suspicious circumstances connected to Hillary Clinton, such as Seth Rich. All right, we're going to take a phone call now. Steve in California, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Well, I watched the interview last night with Sean Hannity and Julian Assange, and I was very impressed. I thought Julian Assange was very composed, very believable, and that he was speaking the truth about the Russian hacking, the not hacking, I might say. But what I did notice in the interview is that Sean Hannity spoke negatively about the mainstream media, which I started to laugh, because he's very much a part of that whole mainstream media. It's the pot calling the kettle black. But he did point out mainstream media. I'm thinking you are part of that. It was kind of.
Well, now Sean Hannity is not the first person in the corporate media to start looking to distance themselves from corporate media as a whole. And we know that Fox News during the campaign was a lot more fair and balanced than CNN, ABC, CBS, Fox, MSNBC, and so forth. So right now the corporate media is realizing they're in serious, serious trouble. And a big part of that is being seen as being corporate media. And so they may be trying to get ready to rebrand, to bring in some new blood and try and keep their little corporate enterprise going a little bit longer. But I think the days of giant mega media corporations are numbered. There used to be laws that said no one entity could own too much media in order to preserve and protect a diversity of opinion. And I would not be at all surprised to see Donald Trump attempt to bring those laws back. And some of these media organizations are, in fact, already being targeted for lawsuits by those in the independent media they've defamed. We know that WikiLeaks has given CNN just 48 hours to retract the story that Assange is a pedophile, or they're going to sue. And I'm aware of one other lawsuit that's being considered against Facebook for selectively banning people who post to that one as well. So the corporate media is in serious, serious trouble, and I'm sure the more egotistical ones are going to say, we're the corporate media, and we will prevail if we just keep doing what we're always doing. But I'm sure that calmer, more rational heads are already thinking it's time for us to maybe not look like we're part of the corporate media anymore. And Sean Hannity is not the first person that we've seen that start to emerge in.
Yeah, that's actually how I saw it, too. I saw it as a desperate attempt to distance themselves and trying to reestablish some credibility in the news department. That's how I saw it. I hope they do, but we're going to be watching, and independent media is doing a great job at making sure that the truth is being known. And I appreciate you and John and the other staff at RBN.
Well, thank you very much for that. And we're being effective because we are diverse, because there are hundreds of us out here. And there's a diversity of opinion and point of view which allows the readers and the listeners to sort of pick and choose, to go from one show to the next website, to the next website, and say, this makes sense, this does not. And as long as you have that freedom to have multiple sources and the freedom to decide for yourself what's going on, you're going to make good decisions in the spirit of Thomas Jefferson.
Well said. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you very much. We're going to let you go here. Now, over in Syria, the Syrian rebels have suspended the peace talks. They're claiming President Assad has violated a 4-day-old ceasefire by attacks near Damascus. We don't know who actually did the attacks near Damascus, but remember, when this thing came together, I did predict the U.S. government would try and find a way to wreck the ceasefire because they're not ready to give up on Syria, let alone get into a war with Russia. Now, apparently, the U.S. and British-backed White Helmets, which have been outed as, for one thing, a propaganda organization, they are helping to shut off water to sections of Aleppo. And it seems to be this idea of punishing Aleppo for losing the eastern part of the city back to the Syrian government. It's revenge. It's also called collective punishment. That's a war crime under international law. Thousands more Iraqis are fleeing Mosul as their military is advancing. And the U.S. is now admitting that, yes, they have been killing civilians in Syria and Iraq, but it was all unintentional. You know, you can't hold us to blame. We didn't mean to kill all those innocent civilian people. We meant well. That's their excuse. We have good intentions. Even if we do kill a lot of innocent people, we're exceptional. We have good intentions. Okay, Democrats, Republicans call for new sanctions against Russia. I think we ought to line them all up, give them rifles and parachutes, and drop them on Moscow right now. And the big story, the one that's got everybody kind of freaked out right now, is Obama has sent U.S. Special Forces to the Russian border. And this is being confirmed by sources within Lithuania. They are supposed to be there to train the NATO allies against the coming Russian aggression. Well, we know who's aggressing, and it isn't Russia, and it isn't Putin. And this smacks of Vietnam all over again, how we got into that mess. Oh, they're not soldiers, we're sending advisors. We're sending the advisors in there. And then once the advisors were there, you just start shooting at everybody. But the concern here is looking at the number of forces along that Russian border, the number of tanks, artillery pieces, and so forth. NATO is positioned to carry out a blitzkrieg invasion into Russia the instant they get an excuse, a false flag of some kind, with the idea of just invading so far, so fast, that Donald Trump will not be able to call this war off after he becomes President of the United States of America. Now, down in Israel, a little bit of justice. You probably remember about a year ago, there was an Israeli Defense Force soldier who was just helping to guard a Palestinian prisoner who was lying on the ground, prone, hands and feet visible, totally under control, and this soldier just walked up and shot him in the head. And it caused a public outcry around the world, and he's just finished his months-long trial. And he's been convicted of manslaughter, even though this was clearly a case of premeditated murder. But they gave him manslaughter. And I think that's why we've been hearing all these stories coming out of Israel for the last week about how Israel approves of the shooting of Palestinian suspects, even in situations where lethal force would not be considered warranted. Now, on the main page of whatreallyhappened.com, there's this wonderful video, 3 myths about Israeli settlements. It's very well produced, well presented, and it absolutely nails what's going on here. And I would like to hope that somebody is going to show this to Donald Trump. When I posted it to Facebook, normally when you post a YouTube video to Facebook, it generates a little preview window. For this one video only, all we got was the arrow. Every other video I put up today got the little preview window. This one, no. Facebook is still trying to discourage people from looking at certain things. Now, Barack Obama, our Nobel Peace Prize winning president, and the Nobel Committee has already said they regretted doing that, Obama's administration has sold more weapons than any other presidential administration since World War II. And look at all the bloodshed that resulted. Now, the gun grabbers in this country hold the position that when a criminal or somebody whose brain is melted on prescription psychiatric medication pulls that trigger and kills somebody, the gun dealer should be held legally responsible. Fair enough. I'm willing to go along with that. So that means that you look at all the people who've been killed with these U.S. weapons of war around the world, Barack Obama is guilty for all of that. And especially in countries with which we are not officially at war, that's murder. Murder in the first degree. All right, let's grab a phone call here. Mike in Tennessee. Aloha, welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
This might be nothing, but it could be something because the establishment likes to drop clues from time to time. Just now on Channel 3 in Memphis, Tennessee, the rebroadcast of the 5 o'clock news, they said, and they showed a Mike Pence conference. They said that, quote, Mike Pence will issue an executive order eliminating Obamacare.
Okay, well, first of all, Mike Pence can't do that because he's not okay, but here's what's going on. Okay, here's what's going on. The U.S. Senate today passed a budget resolution that begins the process of repealing Obamacare and calls for a repeal bill to be ready to be voted on January 27th, 1 week after Donald Trump starts his job.
Hopefully he will, because I'm afraid if they, is what they'd like to do, eliminate him and have their status quo Mr. Pence in there, because even though Mr. Pence does espouse certain things that I agree with, he's still status quo. He's still the establishment system, corporate government, and all of that. Where, who we've got now with Trump, Mr. Trump, he's anti-establishment, and he is going to make changes if he's allowed to. So we need to protect that guy every way we can. For what little we have at this moment, we got somebody in the arena ready to fight.
Yeah, I agree with you on that one, and I'm very concerned about all these people who are coming on out saying how it's disgraceful that Trump has his own private security. What an insult to the Secret Service. Well, frankly, the Secret Service has not been very impressive in recent months. They've
proven themselves to not be trustworthy.
Incompetent is another word. Somebody shot at the White House. It was 4 days before they noticed it, and then it was one of the housekeepers who found it. There was the guy who hopped the fence, got into the East Room. And frankly, I was not impressed with the Secret Service that they sent to check Claire and I out during one of Obama's Christmas holidays a few years back. I mean, the guy stood out like a sore thumb. We made him carry all the heavy stuff. So anyway, I think Trump is justified in having private security. I think the greatest risk of assassination was before the Electoral College. Fortunately, nothing happened. But yes, Donald Trump is going into the White House a threat to more elements of the establishment than John F. Kennedy. And it's a very real possibility that there's going to be a serious attempt to assassinate him. And Mike Pence might be more amenable to the controllers, especially if he realizes that he too could be taken out, because that's what happened to Lyndon Johnson.
Exactly.
But again, we got to protect Donald Trump, and we have to remind everybody that every time there's one of these assassinations, whether it's John F. Kennedy or Robert Kennedy or Martin Luther King or the attempt on George Wallace, that it always turns out to be the government killing somebody off and then framing some innocent person like James Earl Ray.
And Pence appears to be the same as Johnson, which is a war hawk who's more than happy to go to war to make money for Remington Arms or whoever else is, his wife is a stockholder controlling interest in.
Well,
Lady Bird Johnson.
No, I understand that. That raises an interesting question. Why isn't the vice president required to put their wealth into a presidential blind trust? And certainly if Donald Trump is assassinated, then Mike Pence will have to comply with that. All of his wealth will have to be liquidated and placed in a blind trust by a U.S. government trustee, so he won't know where his money is. And I think that should be extended to all members of Congress and all immediate family members of same, because of all the collusion that's going on. Look how much Nancy Pelosi, they caught her doing insider trading. Nothing happened to her. And her husband has grown insanely wealthy off the information she provides to him.
What do they own, Starkist Tuna?
I don't know what their current holdings are, and but I do know that I find it amazing Pelosi won the leadership position yet again, having functionally helped the Democratic Party self-destruct this last year. But I guess she's got the blackmail goods on enough people.
Well, as most corporations, it's the people at the very top that select who's who and what's what, so that's what we're dealing with. And we're not citizens, Mike, and I love you to death, but we're not citizens. We're children of God, and citizens are subjects, and subjects are slaves. It's not our government; it's a corporation posing as government. And I'm hopeful that we can take back this country and refashion some form of government of we the people, which will leave the rest of us alone.
I would certainly like to see that as well. So we're going to let you go here, and we're going to go ahead and close the lines here because I'm going to have to take most of my talking points into tomorrow's show. But I'm going to get a few of these things out here. Now, Donald Trump may already be facing his first crisis with pick for his administration because apparently Stephen Mnuchin is dealing with some pressure because over at The Intercept, they have information about how a bank that was run by Stephen broke foreclosure laws, going on back to that whole 2008 mortgage-backed security fraud meltdown. In case you were wondering, it was not a good Christmas retail shopping season. Macy's has posted disappointing holiday sales. They're now saying they're likely to cut 10,000 workers and move forward with more store closures. Apparently, Sears Corporation is getting ready to close 150 stores. Most of them will be Kmart's, which are owned by Sears. But they're going to close 108 Kmart's and 42 Sears by April. That represents 10% of Sears' store base. And so it was not a Merry Christmas for them. Now then, the Consumer Electronics Show is underway, and everybody's got their whiz-bang gadgets out there, the latest and greatest. I'd love to hit the place myself. I always like to see the latest cutting-edge technology. I understand Kingston has a 2 terabyte flash drive out there now. Ooh, you could hide a lot of DNC emails on something like that here. But some of these things are kind of weird. Apparently, the Consumer Electronics Show gave an innovation award to a Wi-Fi connected, microphone-fitted, smart hairbrush. That's a little weird. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. And I was talking about this item that debuted at the Consumer Electronics Show and was actually given an innovation award, a Wi-Fi connected, microphone-equipped, smart hairbrush. I think they're going a little overboard with all this Internet of stuff idea. But on the principle that nobody ever went broke, underestimating human gullibility, I have started work on a new product we will soon be selling in our online store, the What Really Happened Smart Rock. Wi-Fi connected, secure, invisible to government surveillance, usable as a write-only memory device to store files which should never, ever see the light of day ever again. I think it's going to be as big a hit as the Pet Rock was. Anyway, a couple of stories from human-caused global warming. The other day we were talking about how the ski resorts are opening, and despite all the propaganda about global warming means no more snow and the ski resorts will go out of business, ski resorts are reporting booming business with one exception. In Montana, the ski resorts have had to close down because it's too cold. Because there is a real safety and health risk trying to ski down these mountains dealing with a wind chill of minus 43 degrees. Now, there's another article that's come on out, and this is kind of interesting and worth thinking about. This was from Government Slaves, basically saying that one of the major players behind the global warming scam were the Rockefellers. And apparently their agenda was to use human-caused global warming to basically crush down the fossil fuel industry, oil and coal, so that they could buy it on the cheap and take monopolistic control of it. That's what their goal is in this. And that actually does make a lot of sense because they're always hitting on coal and oil are bad, coal and oil are bad. So's nuclear power. Now then, bad news for Monsanto. As you know, Monsanto did a test for 90 days where they fed rats on GMO corn and Roundup pesticide, and at the end of the 90 days, the rats were still moving around, and they said, see, it proves it's safe. And they went to market. Then there was that French study that raised the rats for their entire lifetime and found that they had serious health problems. And Monsanto moved to crush that one. Well, apparently, just before Thanksgiving, another report came on out, peer-reviewed, titled Effect of Genetically Modified Corn on the Jejunal Mucosa of Adult Male Albino Rats, published in the journal Experimental and Toxicological Pathology. And what they found, they fed rats GM BT corn for 90 days and then autopsied the rats and found they had suffered serious damage to the small intestine. So either Monsanto was being very, very sloppy in their 90-day study, or they lied to us again. There's the music. Time for me to get out of here and get something useful done with the rest of the day. We'll be back tomorrow, Thursday, here at Republic Broadcasting. So remember, you are all part of the independent media. Take what you learn here, share it with other people. Go gently. Don't trigger those defense mechanisms. We'll be back tomorrow. Aloha, America.